You'll always choose the wrong man, Clara. That was the last thing Evan said before the world collapsed around her. The gunfire, the echo of her name, the life she'd been running from finally catching up. But sometimes, the wrong man is the only one brave enough to stand beside you when the truth burns everything else down. Before we dive in, let me know, what time are you listening to this, and where are you? Drop a comment below, we'd love to hear from you. Clara Vance sat in the far corner of the copper room, tracing her fingertip over the faint lipstick mark on her glass. The gin had gone warm, the ice half melted, but she kept holding it as if it anchored her in place. It was supposed to be a short night, a friend's birthday, a little noise to drown the quiet that had followed her since the divorce. 3 months of starting over and pretending to be fine. She'd taken a few freelance jobs to keep the rent paid and the lights on for her 6-year-old daughter, Emma. Work filled the hours, but not the ache that came with silence. When she saw him walk in, her body reacted before her mind caught up. Evan Blake tailored suit hair still perfect, that same self-assured grin that once made her believe he knew better than she did. Tonight his hand rested on the waist of a girl barely out of college. He looked happy, almost theatrical about it. Clara's stomach tightened. For months she had avoided places he might go. She wasn't supposed to be here either, but life had stopped following her plans long ago. He spotted her, of course he did. His smile curved in that cruel, effortless way, a small reminder that he still defined the story. The successful lawyer and his broken ex-wife still drinking alone. Her pulse thudded. She glanced away, ready to leave, when the bartender slid a martini toward her. "Compliments of the gentleman at the end," he said quietly. Her eyes followed the gesture. A man sat alone near the wall, gray suit, calm posture presence that didn't need to announce itself. When their gazes met, he simply raised his glass, a silent greeting, polite and detached. Across the room, Evan's laughter rose above the chatter. That sound had always been a warning before he made someone feel small. Clara knew exactly what came next, his smirk the whispered comment to whoever stood beside him. She could already imagine how he'd describe her later, still pathetic, still waiting for someone to notice her. She felt something snap, maybe pride, maybe exhaustion. She didn't think. She stood, took the martini, and crossed the room. The man watched her approach, not surprised, not cautious. "I need a favor," she said under her breath. "My ex is here. He's watching. I can't be the sad one tonight." His brow lifted slightly. "What kind of favor? Just pretend you know me? Laugh, maybe. 5 minutes." A slow smile curved on one side of his face, polite but unreadable. "Pretending can be dangerous," he said softly. "But I suppose you already know that." Before she could answer, he rose, closed the space between them, and placed his hand lightly at the small of her back. The gesture felt practiced, easy. Convincing enough, he murmured. Evan had turned to look. The man's voice brushed close to her ear. Sometimes he said, "You need a detail that sells the story." Then he kissed her. It wasn't rough or staged, just enough to unmoor her. The world dulled to a hush. She forgot the crowd, the bar, the years she'd spent being careful. His hand stayed steady against her spine, not demanding, only anchoring her. For the first time in a long time, she felt still. When he let go, she could breathe again. Evan was gone. The bartender pretended not to notice. Clara reached for her bag. "Thank you," she started, but the man's voice cut gently through. "Did he ever make you afraid?" Her throat caught. No one had ever asked it that way, direct, without pity. She didn't answer. Drizzle tapped against the pavement. Evan stood near the entrance, arguing with the security guard, trying to push past. The stranger slipped off his jacket and laid it over her shoulders. "Let me walk you out," he said. "He doesn't know when to quit." A black car waited at the curb engine, low headlights off. The driver rolled down the window at a small signal from the man. Clara hesitated, caught between the urge to flee and the quiet authority in his tone. She glanced back once. Evan was still yelling, face flushed, that same anger she'd learned to read long ago. The man beside her said nothing more. Clara climbed into the car, the jacket heavy on her shoulders. The door shut behind her and the rain thickened soft but unrelenting, as if the city itself was holding its breath. The car moved at an even pace, steady and quiet, as if the world had nothing to do with them. Clara pressed her bag against her lap. Her heart hadn't yet decided whether to slow down. The man beside her spoke into his phone in another language, Italian maybe. His tone stayed calm, unhurried, like someone used to giving orders that were obeyed without question. When he ended the call, he looked at her. "He's still at the bar," he said, voice level, "arguing with the staff. I don't think you should go home tonight." Clara's fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. "I don't even know you," she said. "I can't just follow a stranger somewhere." "You don't need to know me," he replied. "Just don't let a man like that follow you home." His words left no room for argument. They carried the same weight Evans once had, only without the cruelty. It unsettled her, how easily she obeyed. The driver steered them through a maze of slick streets, the sound of traffic muffled by the hum of the engine. Clara tried to focus on the rain patterns on the glass instead of the man next to her. He sat with his hands folded loosely as if the night's chaos didn't belong to him. When the car stopped, she looked up and saw a tall building. A doorman in a dark coat stepped forward. Matteo. She remembered the bartender had said his name spoke quietly, and the man nodded with a small gesture of respect. Matteo pressed an elevator button and said nothing during the ride up. They entered a wide hallway that smelled faintly of cedar and something metallic. He held out a key card. "Stay here for the night. In the morning, I'll have someone take you home." Clara stared at it. "I really shouldn't." "You can," he said. "You're safe here. You don't owe me anything." The words sounded more like instructions than comfort, but they worked. She took the key card, whispered a thank you, and stepped into the guest room. When she turned back, he was already gone. The apartment felt like it belonged to someone who needed order more than rest. One coat on a rack, everything aligned. She brushed the counter's cold surface with her fingertips, then sat on the couch, unable to settle. The hum of trains and traffic seeped through the walls. She thought of Emma, her daughter, asleep, miles away, clutching the worn bear she never let go. Guilt pressed against her ribs. She shouldn't have gone out, shouldn't have kissed a stranger, but for those few seconds it had felt like breathing again. The memory came in fragments, his hand steady at her back, the way he guided her out of Evan's stare. It hadn't been passion, only a quiet recognition, two strangers holding stillness together. She pulled the blanket higher, trying to push the thought away. The last man who'd promised safety had built a cage instead. Yet her mind circled back to Matteo's question. Did he ever make you afraid? No one had asked her that before. She lay on the bed, counting breaths until dawn bled through the clouds. Reaching for her phone, she meant to check the time. It buzzed before she touched it. A message. "He knows where you are. Leave now." No name, no punctuation, just the letter R beneath it. The phone still glowed in her hand, the message burning into her mind. She read it twice, waiting for more. None came. The room felt tighter air, thick in her throat. She stepped into the hallway. Matteo was gone. A housekeeper looked up from the kitchen. "Mr. Rinaldi had to leave early," she said politely. "He asked that you make yourself comfortable." Comfortable. Clara almost laughed. Nothing about this was. She dressed quickly, returned the borrowed jacket to the arm of the couch, and left without telling anyone. By the time she reached the street, she didn't know where else to go, so she took the train toward Brooklyn. The clatter of wheels on tracks steadied her nerves for a while. When her phone vibrated again, she flinched, but it was only a message from Rosa, her oldest friend, the one who'd stood beside her during the divorce. Rosa had opened a small cafe on Atlantic Avenue. The smell of baked bread and espresso wrapped around Clara as she entered. For a moment, it felt like safety. Rosa looked up. "You look like someone who hasn't slept," she said, pulling Clara into a quick hug. "Sit. I'll get you something warm." When she returned with 2 cups, Rosa leaned across the table. "Now tell me what's wrong. And don't say nothing. I can read your face better than a book." Clara hesitated. She chose her words carefully. There was a man. He helped me out of a bad situation. My ex showed up and things got tense. Tense how? He kissed me, Clara said, lowering her voice, to make it look real. But afterward, he took me somewhere safe, said he didn't want Evan following me. Rosa frowned. And you stayed. I didn't have a plan. Rosa studied her for a moment, and this morning, Clara slid her phone across the table, showing her the message. Rosa's brow furrowed as she read. Could be Evan, she murmured, but it could also be someone trying to scare you. Did you tell that man about it? He wasn't there when I woke up. That's convenient. Rosa leaned back. Clara, you have a talent for finding men who look like solutions but come with conditions. The words stung, though Rosa hadn't meant them cruelly. Clara wrapped her hands around the cup, letting the heat soak in. He didn't ask for anything she said softly, at least not yet. Two men in dark coats stood by a black car pretending to check their phones. They weren't drinking coffee or talking. One lifted his head toward the cafe, then looked away. Rosa followed Clara's gaze. Friends of yours. Clara shook her head. I've never seen them. Then finish that coffee. I'm driving you home. You're not walking past those two. When they stepped out, the car was gone. Only a damp patch on the curb remained. Clara told herself she was imagining things, but the sense of being watched stayed with her. She thanked Rosa and headed toward Manhattan. Each block felt heavier. The doorman at Matteo's building greeted her by name, and that unsettled her most. Matteo waited near the elevator, hands in his pockets. You went out early, he said evenly. I needed air. Next time tell someone. I'd have arranged it. It's not a prison. No, he said. But someone out there sees you as a target. That makes it my problem. His tone was too smooth, practiced. The staff nearby pretended not to hear. In the mirrored wall, her reflection beside his looked mismatched, her damp clothes, his pressed shirt. As the doors opened, he added, From now on, someone stays with you when you go out. Don't argue. I don't need protection. You already have it, he said, whether you want it or not. The doors closed. In the narrow space, her pulse slipped off beat. She couldn't tell who frightened her more, the man who'd lost control or the one who never did. Cold wind cut through her coat at the school gate. Emma came running, backpack, bouncing hair tangled. Clara knelt, zipped the girl's jacket, listened to her chatter about art class and a new friend who liked dinosaurs. Evan watched them from beside a parked car, hands in his pockets, gaze fixed. The sight stopped her breath. She hadn't seen him since the custody letters arrived, the ones demanding rights he'd never earned. He crossed halfway, voice low enough for only her to hear. She belongs somewhere safe, Clara. You keep dragging her into your messes. I'm giving her peace, Clara said, holding Emma's shoulder close. Evan's smile was thin and deliberate. Peace doesn't come from running. He turned and left her standing in the cold heartbeat pounding against the air. That night, Clara couldn't settle. Every creak of the old apartment made her sit up. She told herself his words were just another act meant to scare her. Then near midnight came the sound of a lock snapping. The chain hung loose. The door had been forced. Nothing seemed missing, wallet, laptop, jewelry still in place. Then she saw the empty frame on the shelf. The wedding photo was gone, a rectangle of dust left behind. She pressed her hand to her mouth to keep from waking Emma. It wasn't theft, it was a message. Within minutes, she packed a small bag, lifted her daughter from bed, and walked out without locking the door. She called the only number she trusted. Stay where you are, Matteo said. I'll come. He didn't ask questions. When his car stopped, he opened the door and motioned her in. Emma stirred but didn't wake. Adrenaline kept Clara upright. At the penthouse, Matteo led them inside. You're bleeding, he said, pointing to her hand. A small scrape, likely from the broken latch. I'm fine. He fetched a first aid kit, cleaned the cut, wrapped it in silence. Alcohol stung, and she focused on the steady rhythm of his hands. When he finished, he said, Whoever did that wanted you to know they could. Clara stared at the floor. He took our wedding picture. Then he wants control. That's all men like him understand. She almost asked what kind of man he was, but the question stayed between them. His hand trembled slightly as he pressed the bandage flat. She noticed a pale scar near his thumb, proof of older battles, pain recognizing its own. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "It became my problem," he replied, "the night he looked at you like property." Emma mumbled in her sleep on the couch. Matteo adjusted the blanket around her shoulders. "No one threatens a child to make a point," he murmured. Clara stood in the doorway, unsure whether to thank him or ask him to stop. The tension she'd carried since the break-in thinned, leaving a quiet she didn't yet trust. When Matteo straightened, exhaustion softened the edge of his composure. Grief folded beneath discipline. He stepped back. "The guest room's ready. Stay until I find out who did this." Clara only nodded. He glanced once at Emma, switched off the lamp. "Try to rest," he said, voice low as he walked away. The courthouse carried the scent of coffee and nerves. Clara sat on a wooden bench, fingers clasped tight. Emma stayed with Rosa, shielded from the hearing that would decide where she lived. Across the hall, Evan stood beside his lawyer, confidence polished for the crowd. Her attorney leaned closer. "He's filing for temporary custody. Claims you've exposed the child to unsafe conditions." He mentioned a man named Matteo Rinaldi. The name landed like a blow. He doesn't even know him," she said. "He doesn't have to. The tabloids ran photos this morning. You and Mr. Rinaldi outside his building." The world closed in around her. She'd seen her name in gossip before, but never like this mother linked to alleged crime figure. Each line turned her life into rumor, echoing with Evan's satisfaction. When the judge entered, the room fell still. The hearing moved quickly, but cut deep. Evan's lawyer called her reckless, unstable, easily swayed. Then came the printouts, grainy photos, headlines, scraps of her life twisted into proof. Her attorney spoke, but Clara barely heard. The noise in her chest drowned everything else. She fixed her eyes on the tiled floor until the words blurred. Then the doors opened. Matteo walked in, calm, certain. A ripple passed through the room. He didn't look at her. Only bent toward her lawyer, said something brief, and handed over a sealed envelope. The judge frowned. "Reason for this interruption? New evidence, Your Honor," her attorney replied. "Records and statements documenting Mr. Blake's intimidation and stalking." A stir went through the courtroom. Evan's expression cracked. The judge called a recess. Clara sat frozen, aware of Matteo standing behind her. He gave a single nod, steady, wordless assurance. When it ended, reporters waited on the steps. Questions flew about Matteo, about the photos, about Emma. She tried to push through the crowd, cameras flashing too close. Someone shoved. She lost balance. A hand caught her, pulled her in. Matteo's coat brushed her cheek. "Keep walking," he said. He didn't release her until they reached the car. Her hands shook. The crowd held back, sensing something unspoken in his restraint. He opened the door, guided her in, and shut it firmly. They drove without speaking. Clara stared at her hands, one still warm where he'd grabbed her. It wasn't tenderness, just instinct stripped bare. "You didn't have to come," she said. "I did." He crossed a line. Her phone vibrated, messages from clients, teachers, parents. Work canceled, school postponed. Every line another door closing. Matteo glanced over. "It's what he wanted," he said. "To isolate you." She turned to the window. "And now the world thinks I live with a criminal." Let them think, he answered. Truth doesn't live long in headlines. Traffic slowed their progress through Lower Manhattan. She wanted to ask how he'd gathered the evidence so fast, but stopped herself. "Did you know this was coming?" she asked. He kept his eyes forward. "I knew he wouldn't stop until he lost something he couldn't replace." Neither spoke again. The city passed in a blur, each light reflecting across the glass where their faces overlapped. Two people turned slightly away, caught in the same uncertain motion. The road curved through quiet hills. Clara hadn't realized how much she'd missed open space until the city slipped behind them. Emma pressed her face to the window, counting cows, her voice bright with excitement. Matteo drove without music, one hand resting lightly on the steering wheel. "We'll be there soon," he said. "My mother used to come here when the city got too loud. said the air knew how to listen. The cabin appeared suddenly between the trees, a small wooden house with peeling paint and wild grass pushing against the steps. Matteo unlocked the door, pushing it open with a quiet grunt. Dust drifted from the corners, stirred by the movement. "Hasn't been touched in years," he said, "but it holds." They worked side by side through the afternoon, clearing cobwebs, scrubbing surfaces, replacing a broken latch on a window that refused to close. Every so often, Emma appeared with a new discovery: a chipped teacup, a tin of buttons, a photograph of a woman with Matteo's eyes. "Your mother Clara asked when Emma handed it over." He nodded. "She hated being photographed. That's probably the only one left." There wasn't much else to say. The silence between them carried more weight than conversation. Clara didn't feel the need to fill it. As evening settled, Emma fell asleep early, curled on the couch beneath a worn quilt. Clara stepped onto the porch where Matteo sat with a mug in hand. Crickets called from the tall grass. Somewhere far off, a dog barked once, then went quiet. "Thank you for this," she said, settling onto the step beside him, "for letting her feel normal again." "She's a good kid," he said. "She reminds me of my mother, always finding reasons to stay kind." Clara smiled faintly. "That sounds like you, too." He shook his head. "No, I'm not built like her. She believed people could start over if given space. My father didn't. He built something that doesn't allow that." "Your family business," she said carefully. He looked out toward the dark trees. "A legacy I didn't ask for. But when she died, it was the only way to keep what little she left me safe." The way he spoke wasn't defensive, just tired. It made her chest tighten. She understood that exhaustion, the kind that came from fighting the shape of the life you were born into. A breeze brushed past them, carrying the faint scent of rain. Clara folded her arms, the quiet between them deepening. When he glanced at her, there was no trace of calculation, no distance. "You don't have to trust me," he said, "but I hope you know I'd never use her or you to win anything." She nodded, unable to find the right words. The trust he spoke of wasn't something she could give on command. It had to form slowly, like a scar healing beneath the skin. But in that moment, she felt closer to believing him than she wanted to admit. They sat until the sky dimmed completely. Matteo leaned back, hands folded behind his head. "When I was a kid," he said quietly, "I used to think this house was the only place in the world where no one wanted something from me." Clara studied his profile, the faint lines near his eyes that made him look older than he was. "You still think that I try to," he said, "but I'm not the same boy anymore." The words hung there, soft but heavy. Clara found herself wondering what he'd been before power hardened him, before he learned to carry calm like armor. A faint creak came. Matteo stood and checked the door, making sure the lock held. When he came back, the phone in his pocket began to buzz. He glanced at the screen. Whatever name appeared there changed the rhythm of his breathing. He didn't answer right away. "Is everything okay?" Clara asked. His reply came after a pause. "We have to go back. Something happened in the city." "What kind of something?" He shook his head. "Not here." New York met them wide awake. In the lobby, Emma's head sank against Clara's shoulder while Matteo moved ahead, jaw tight, thinking faster than he spoke. Back at the apartment, the stillness felt wrong, only their reflections in the glass and a low thread of traffic. His phone rang the moment he set down his keys. He answered in Italian, clipped and short. She caught the meaning, "Anyway, trouble." Clara settled Emma on the couch and pulled the blanket up to her chin. "Is it about Evan?" Matteo hesitated. "He's in trouble. But trouble for him doesn't mean safety for you." "What happened?" He ran a hand through his hair. He sold information, security routes, names, things that shouldn't leave my circle. Clara stared at him, not sure she'd heard right. "You mean about you?" "Yes. To people who would use it." The idea of Evan dealing with that world, Matteo's world, felt surreal and somehow predictable. Matteo's phone buzzed again. He didn't answer this time. "He's desperate," he said. "He'll use whatever leverage he has left." Clara's hands trembling slightly. Then I should leave. Take her somewhere quiet until this ends. He turned sharply. No. If he's tracking you walking out, makes you easier to find. You can't keep me here, she said, voice tight. I know what this looks like. Doors locked, guards outside. It feels the same. He took a breath, as if the words struck deeper than she intended. I'm not him. I know, she said softer, but I can't breathe when I feel watched, even if it's for my own safety. Matteo spoke into the phone again, pacing near the window. His words came fast, too quiet for her to follow. The tone wasn't anger, it was control stretched thin, held together by will. Clara began folding clothes into a small bag, mostly Emma's. Each movement steadied her hands. The idea of being ready, even if she couldn't leave, gave her a sense of control she hadn't felt in days. When she turned back, Matteo was standing by the window, one shoulder leaning against the glass. There was a tiredness in him now, but also something harder. A quiet readiness for whatever came next. He spoke without looking at her. They're watching the building. My people say the other side's getting bold. You make it sound like a war, Clara said. It is. Just quieter. Matteo's second phone rang, one he kept separate from the rest. He answered immediately, voice dropping even lower. The conversation was short. When he hung up, his shoulders stiffened. What now, she asked. They found out about the house, he said. The one in Hudson Valley. Someone followed the trail there. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. You said no one knew about it. No one was supposed to. His voice stayed calm, but she could hear the effort behind it. It means someone close to me is selling information. Evan might not be working alone. A sound cut through her thoughts. Matteo's head lifted instantly. Then came the echo, the unmistakable crack of a gunshot. He was already moving. Down, he said, pulling her from the couch. Another shot farther away, then shouting from the street. Emma woke, crying, confusion spilling into panic. Matteo barked orders in Italian into his phone. Within seconds, footsteps thundered in the hallway, his men voices urgent, organized. He turned back to Clara, crouching beside her. It's not safe here anymore, he said quietly but firmly. We leave now. Where, she whispered. Anywhere but here. He rose and nodded toward the door. From now on, none of us stays in one place. Clara grabbed Emma's coat, hands unsteady, heart-hammering. She didn't ask where they were going. One hand clutched her daughter. The other brushed Matteo's sleeve as he guided them into the hall. Sirens wailed somewhere far off. The ride to Brooklyn dragged. Matteo gave quiet instructions to the driver. Clara kept Emma close, feeling the girl's uneven sleep against her shoulder. Tension filled the car, thin as static. They turned down a narrow street of old warehouses. The building they stopped at looked forgotten, windows, boarded paint peeling to gray. Matteo keyed in a code, the lock grinding open. This was my uncle's, he said. Now it's just storage. He led them to a smaller room, walled in steel, a table at the center scattered with papers and maps. Emma drifted toward the boxes, tracing worn stamps with her fingers. Clara glanced at the table. Her eyes stopped on a map webbed with photos and notes, Evan's face in the middle, red lines, reaching out like a net. She stepped closer. Why is he here? Because he wasn't just selling gossip. He's been working with people who want what I have. Your business, my position, information, the kind that opens doors or closes them forever. He rubbed the back of his neck, the gesture almost humanizing in its weariness. But his focus wasn't me. It was you. Clara blinked, unsure she'd heard right. Matteo's eyes met hers. He thought you could be used to get to me, or that by destroying you he'd destroy what I'd started to care about. The words fell heavy between them. She wanted to deny it, to push back, but something in his tone silenced her. You're saying he's been following me since long before the divorce, Matteo said quietly. He hired people, cameras, paid for reports about where you went, who you met. When we crossed paths, he already knew. He made sure I did too. Her pulse stumbled. You knew about me. I knew your name. not your story." He exhaled, leaning on the edge of the table. At first I thought it was coincidence. Then I saw how often he appeared near my people, how he used your life as leverage. He wanted me distracted. He wanted to prove that everyone can be bought one way or another. Clara's throat felt dry. Evan had built a cage around her, and she'd mistaken its walls for fate. She sank into the chair beside the table, staring at the lines of red ink. So it wasn't just cruelty, it was control. Matteo nodded. He enjoyed making you doubt yourself. Men like him feed on that. Something broke loose in her chest. Not quite anger, not quite relief. All this time I thought I left him because I couldn't love him anymore. But maybe I left because somewhere I finally saw the bars. He didn't answer. Instead, he placed a folder in front of her documents, emails, photographs, each one proof of what he'd said. Matteo's voice softened. "I should have told you sooner. I thought I could manage it quietly. But he's closer than I believed." She looked up. His face was drawn, the calm stripped away. Whatever he was hiding before, he wasn't now. "Why help me?" she asked. "You could have stayed out of this." "Because you didn't deserve to be another casualty in his games," he said. "And because I know what it's like to lose everything to someone else's power." The honesty in his tone startled her more than the revelations. There was no defense, no pride, just fatigue, and something that sounded like regret. Emma's small voice broke the silence. "Mommy, it's raining harder." The child stood by the window slit, watching water stream down the glass. The sound filled the warehouse, steady and unending. Matteo walked over, checking his phone. His expression tightened. "They've found this place," he said. "We can't stay." Clara rose immediately, reaching for Emma's hand. "Who?" He didn't answer. "Get what you need. We leave now." Then he tore the map, folded it once, and slipped it under his arm. The apartment sat above a laundromat near the Queens train line, the constant rumble of passing cars and distant brakes filling every silence. Matteo paced the narrow living room. "They'll have papers ready by morning," he said. "You and Emma will go north. My men will get you to Montreal before sunrise." Clara straightened. "No." He stopped moving. "Clara, this isn't a debate. If I run now, he wins," she said. "He'll think I'm still the same woman he could scare into silence." Matteo's jaw flexed. "You think you can fight him? You think standing in front of a man like that proves anything?" "It proves he doesn't own the ending," she said quietly. "I do." He studied her for a long time, as if weighing how much of that resolve was fear in disguise. "You're not trained for this," he said at last. "You don't know the kind of men he's working with. I know exactly the kind of man he is. I lived with him." Her voice didn't rise, but the words landed sharp. "You told me once people like him feed on doubt. Then maybe the only way to stop him is to stop doubting myself." The room went still except for the low tremor of a train passing. "You don't realize what you're asking for," he said. "I'm not asking." That seemed to disarm him more than defiance. His shoulders dropped slightly, the fight leaving his voice. "All right," he murmured. "But if we do this, you don't go near him alone. You let me handle the part that gets ugly. I don't need you to fight for me," she said. "Just stand beside me." He looked back. "That's exactly what I mean." The conversation ended there, but its weight lingered. Matteo pulled a folded map from his coat pocket, spreading it across the table. Lines and notes filled the paper, marked with his careful handwriting. His office downtown still holds what he took files, drives proof of what he's done. If we recover them, he loses leverage. Clara nodded. "Then that's where we start." He gave her a thin smile. "You sound like someone planning a heist." "Maybe I am," she said, surprising even herself with the calm in her tone. They spent the next hour sketching details. The time the cleaning staff left the keycard, Matteo could replicate the security camera positions. Clara's memory of the place helped. She still remembered where Evan kept his private safe, the one he never let her near. Matteo wrote quickly, his movements efficient but methodical. You know, he said softly, most people spend their lives trying to avoid chaos. You walk straight into it. She gave a small shrug. Maybe chaos is just what happens when you stop pretending everything's fine. He almost smiled, then looked down again, clicking the safety on his gun before setting it aside. I forgot what that sounded like, someone believing in their own story. It's been a long time since I believed in mine, she said. Then maybe that's what this is about, he said, taking it back. Clara made a list of what she needed to recover: birth records, bank transfers, the affidavits Evan had forged to twist custody filings. Each item felt like a small act of reclamation proof she still existed beyond his control. Matteo checked his gun, tucking it under his coat. My men will keep watch. We go tomorrow night. He won't expect it that soon. She nodded. There was no clear plan beyond this. No guarantee that confronting Evan would end anything. But she wasn't paralyzed by fear. He handed her a cup of water, fingers brushing hers for a second longer than necessary. You should sleep, he said. Tomorrow we stop letting him decide what happens next. I'm not sure I'll sleep at all, she admitted. You will, he said. You're too tired not to. The elevator opened to an empty corridor. Frosted glass offices lined each side, half lit, the hum of vents louder than the city below. Matteo moved first, checking corners, hand near the gun at his side. Clara followed, bag heavy on her shoulder, gloves, flashlight, and what courage she had left. His man had already unlocked Evan's door. They slipped in. The place still carried that cold perfection Evan prized: polished wood, framed degrees, order masking deceit. Files are in the back, Clara whispered. She knelt, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out a thick folder marked under a false name. Pages of falsified statements, hidden income-altered filings. This is it. Matteo leaned close. Good. Let's a lock clicked down the hall. Then Evan's voice, sharp, deliberate. I should have known you'd come yourself, Rinaldi. Always the hero. He appeared in the doorway suit, flawless arrogance intact, still breaking and entering Clara. You never learned boundaries. Matteo stepped between them. Don't talk to her. Evan ignored him. She's still mine where it counts in record and reputation. Clara gripped the desk. You lost that right when you turned fear into a leash. Evan smirked. You think he's different? Has he told you what he does when someone crosses him? He took out his phone and played a short video. Matteo stood in a room, a man bound before him, a command in Italian, then violence. When it ended, the silence hurt. You see, Evan said. Same man, new cage. You've got a type. Clara forced herself to ask, Is it true? Yes, Matteo said quietly. It was business, but not right. Evan smiled. Honest. How noble. Too bad it won't matter once the police see this. Matteo's tone hardened. If you wanted me ruined, you'd have done it already. What do you want? What I've always wanted: control, and to watch her lose everything again. Clara's fear burned into anger. You think control is power. You're still a coward hiding behind threats. Evan's smirk faltered, then returned. Judges love clean mothers, Clara, not ones linked to criminals. Matteo's man appeared. 2 guards coming. Evan pocketed his phone. You better run. I'd hate for Emma to visit you through glass. An alarm erupted, lights flashing red. Matteo grabbed her wrist. Move! They ran. The stairwell shook with shouts above. At the last door, Clara looked back. Evan still standing there, phone glowing against his grin. You never learn, he called. The door slammed. Clara stumbled down the steps, folder tight to her chest. Matteo's hand stayed firm at her back, guiding her through the dark. By the time they reached the alley, her breath came ragged. Across the street, the car waited, engine running. She hesitated, Evan's voice still in her head, then caught Matteo's eyes, tired, resolute, focused on her. Without speaking, she got in. The city blurred past, lights smeared across the windows. Trains rattled somewhere beyond the skyline, a low hum that followed them home. Later, in the quiet of the apartment, Clara sat at the table with the first aid kit open. Matteo winced as she pressed gauze to his shoulder, the blood dried dark against his shirt. "It's not deep," she said. "You were lucky." He gave a faint smile. "Luck's a word I stopped believing in." Her hand stayed steady as she tightened the bandage. The tear in his shirt exposed a thin line of skin. She tied the knot carefully. "Hold still," she murmured. When she finished, she sat back, wiping her palms on a towel. Silence stretched between them. Finally, she asked the question that had been waiting since the office. "That man in the video, you really killed him?" Matteo looked down at his hands, then at her. "I did what I had to do. To protect yourself, to protect my people." His tone was flat, almost resigned. "There are rules in my world. You break them, others pay. I can live with my choices. Doesn't mean I'm proud of them." Clara studied his face, the controlled calm that never cracked. "So it's true then. Everything Evan said." "No," Matteo said. "It's never everything. Men like him show only the part that hurts most." She folded her arms, unsure if she was angry or simply tired. "I don't know if I can trust anyone anymore. You, him, even myself." He leaned forward, voice softer. "Then start there. Trust yourself first. The rest can wait." Her throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to demand something solid to hold on to, but all that came out was a quiet, "I don't know how." "You've been doing it since the night I met you," he said. "Every time you stood your ground, even when it scared you." The words settled somewhere deep, where her fear had lived for years. Clara stood, needing distance more than comfort. "I'll check on Emma." Matteo didn't stop her. The bedroom was dim, the lamp flickering with each passing train. Emma slept curled beneath a blanket too large, one arm flung over her pillow. Clara brushed her hair back, steadying herself with the sound of her daughter's breathing. In the next room, Matteo poured water into a glass left arm, stiff beneath the bandage. The table was buried in papers and half-finished notes. The folder from Evan's office lay open, receipts, phone records, names that could bring down half his network. He stared at them, wondering how much more of himself he'd lose before it ended. The phone buzzed. "Tell me," he said. Dante's voice crackled through. "You won't like this. Evan met with Russo tonight. They signed something he's trading your roots, suppliers your men's names, for protection." Matteo's grip tightened. Protection from me, from everyone. He's giving them enough to start a war. Move first. I can't. She's here. So is the kid. "You're hesitating," Dante said. "That's not you. I'm not the same man. Then stay alive long enough to prove it." The line went dead. Matteo stared at his reflection in the window. Gray light city, blur rain streaks across glass. He touched his shoulder. The sting grounded him. In the bedroom, Clara leaned against the wall beside Emma's bed. She didn't think about the folder or the man standing alone with too many choices. The courthouse smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant. Evan waited, polished and composed, the same mask he'd always worn. She passed without meeting his gaze. Papers shuffled, the judge entered, and the session began. The judge read the first page, expression tightening. Evan's attorney objected, but his words barely reached the bench before being waved off. "Proceed," the judge said. Clara's voice was steady when she spoke. "These recordings were made during our marriage. They document emotional coercion, blackmail, and threats. I didn't report them before because I believed no one would believe me." Evan's jaw clenched. His composure began to slip. "You're twisting everything," he snapped. "This is manipulation." The judge raised a hand. "Mr. Blake, you will remain silent until asked to speak." But he couldn't. "She's lying. She's with him." That criminal. The word echoed across the room, ugly and desperate. Cameras clicked somewhere behind. Clara didn't waver. "Yes," she said, calm and steady. "I am with him. The man you call a criminal taught me not to run from people like you." Evan turned toward her, his composure cracking. "You think this ends here," he hissed, but the bailiff was already moving him back. the rest blurred questions, documents a recess that stretched too long. When it ended, the judge's tone carried finality. Custody returned to Clara. Investigation into Evan reopened. Words that looked dry on paper but breathed life back into her chest. Reporters waited on the courthouse steps, crowding the entrance. "Miss Vance, did you fabricate the evidence? Are you connected to Matteo Rinaldi? Was this case influenced by organized crime?" Clara stopped at the top step, meeting the noise head-on. "I'm connected to him," she said clearly, because he reminded me I didn't have to hide anymore. The questions grew louder, but she kept walking. Security guided her through the crowd toward the barricades. Across the street, Matteo stood by a car, hands in his pockets, watching quietly. When she reached him, he didn't speak, and neither did she. Cameras flashed behind them, fading into the city's hum. Clara looked back once at the courthouse, the marble steps gleaming under a weak sun. "It's over for now," she said. Matteo gave a small nod. For now. Their eyes met hers, steady, his guarded but gentler. The quiet between them no longer felt like distance. They began walking their steps, uneven but aligned. Reporters shouted her name again, demanding more story. She didn't turn. The parking garage smelled of rain and metal, a damp echo that clung to the concrete. Clara's shoes splashed through shallow puddles, each step ringing in the hollow space. Evan waited near the far end. "You came alone," he said, his voice carrying just enough to reach her. "That was the point," she replied, keeping her tone even. He smiled without warmth. "You've always liked to believe you're brave, but bravery and recklessness look the same from a distance." Clara stopped a few steps away. Her pulse thudded at the base of her throat, but she didn't step back. "You asked me here to talk, so talk." Evan's eyes flickered toward her coat pocket where she'd tucked the small recorder. "Still playing games," he said. "I thought after everything you'd at least look at me without suspicion." "I did that for years," she said quietly. "It nearly destroyed me." He shifted his weight, frustration rippling through his voice. "I made mistakes, yes, but you ran straight into the arms of a criminal. That's your idea of healing." Clara let out a slow breath. "My idea of healing is choosing for myself." He stepped closer. "He used you. You're too naive to see it. He's feeding off your guilt, your need to be rescued. I should have protected you from men like him. Protected me." Her laugh came out brittle. "You broke me, Evan. You called it love because that made it easier for you to sleep at night." His face tightening. "You don't understand the things I've done for you." "I understand perfectly," she said. "That's why I recorded this conversation." The flicker of surprise was quick, but she caught it. His eyes darted toward the concrete ramp behind her. She recognized that look, panic under calculation. Don't she warned, but he was already reaching inside his coat. The sound of footsteps filled the air, coming from every direction. Men in dark jackets emerged between the rows of cars, Matteo's men silent alert. And behind them, flashing blue lights reflected off wet concrete as police vehicles rolled into view. Evan's face twisted. "You brought them here. You brought this on yourself." He yanked a gun free and backed toward the pillar. "No one walks away clean, Clara. Not even him." A single gunshot cracked through the air. Matteo appeared from the shadows, moving faster than she thought possible. The bullet grazed his shoulder as he reached her, shoving her down behind the concrete barrier. "Stay down," he said, voice low but steady. She could barely hear over the pounding in her chest. "You shouldn't have come. Couldn't let you face him alone." He winced, pressing a hand to his shoulder. The blood spread quickly through the fabric, dark and glistening. Another shout came from across the garage, officers calling for Evan to drop the weapon. His defiance lasted only a few seconds before he was surrounded, forced to his knees, the gun clattering to the floor. The chaos dimmed. Matteo slumped against the pillar, breathing shallow. Clara crawled to him, tearing the edge of her sleeve to press against the wound. "You're bleeding too much," she whispered. He shook his head faintly. "It's nothing. Don't lie to me." His laugh was barely audible. Old habits die hard. The sirens grew louder as officers cuffed Evan and led him toward the waiting cars. Matteo tilted his head toward her, the corner of his mouth lifting despite the pain. "See, you didn't need me to fight your battles after all." She kept pressure on the wound, her hands trembling now that the adrenaline was fading. "You shouldn't talk." He ignored her. "And you did choose right. Maybe not the easy way, but the right one." Tears blurred her vision, not from fear, but from the strange relief that washed over her, like the world had finally stopped holding its breath. The paramedics moved fast, lifting Matteo onto the stretcher. He caught Clara's wrist. "Don't let this make you bitter," he said, voice rough. "Promise me." She nodded. His grip loosened and they carried him toward the ambulance. Evan's voice cut through the noise. "You think they'll let you keep that child after this?" She didn't turn. The police pulled him away, his words fading into the rain. When the sirens disappeared, Clara sat on the curb, the recorder still in her pocket. Rain soaked her sleeves. Matteo's blood stained her hands bright against gray. She pressed them together, holding on to the moment before it slipped away, the moment everything chasing her finally stopped. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and linen. Machines hummed beside Matteo's bed, his breathing slow and even. His shoulder was bandaged, the gauze already smudged from where she'd touched it. Emma slept in a chair nearby, one hand wrapped around a packet of crackers. Clara sat by the window. The Hudson stretched gray under a dull sky. Peace felt heavier than she'd imagined, her thoughts too restless to settle. When she rose to refill Matteo's cup, something clinked against the floor. A silver lighter, scratched worn, engraved with a single letter V, and beneath it, Vance, 2020. Her breath caught. The name was hers. The year she'd left Evan, the year she'd promised herself not to look back. It wasn't coincidence. She remembered the bar, his timing, how he'd known where Evan would be. Everything aligned. Matteo had known her long before that night. She sat again, the lighter, warm in her palm. The machine's rhythm filled the room. One question stayed. Was any of it real? When Matteo stirred, she placed the lighter on the bedside table. His gaze found hers. Understanding flickered immediately. "I was hired," he said, voice rough, "before we met, to investigate Evan, his finances, his marriage. When I saw your name, I didn't plan to meet you. But when I did, I stopped the job." Her throat tightened. "So the bar that night, I didn't plan it," he said. "But I knew who you were. I knew what he'd done to you. You let me think it was chance. I was afraid you'd only see the man who'd been paid to watch you." Her hand gripped the windowsill. "And now I see both." He tried to sit up, winced. "Clara, I didn't use you." She didn't answer. A gull cried somewhere beyond the window. "If I could undo it, I would," he said. "But that path led me here, bleeding in this bed, waiting for you to decide if I belong in your life." Her eyes met his. Anger had faded, leaving something quieter. "You know everything about me," she said, "except if I can forgive you." He reached out his hand, brushing her arm, cautious. The touch drew her closer before she meant to move. When he leaned in, the kiss was soft, an apology without words. It wasn't forgiveness, only proof that two broken people still reached for warmth. Footsteps passed in the hall. Clara pulled the blanket higher over Matteo's chest, her hand brushing the lighter. The engraving glinted before she turned it face down. The courtroom felt smaller than she remembered, pale walls, benches, worn smooth by waiting hands. Clara sat near the front palms, flat on her lap. The tremor that once betrayed her was gone. Not calm, exactly, just steady, with nothing left to hide. Evan entered through the side door, wrists loosely bound. His suit still fit, but the confidence had drained away. When his eyes met hers, disbelief flickered there, the story no longer his to tell. The judge read the charges: privacy violation, manipulation, endangerment, obstruction. Each word landed like a slow verdict. Evan's lawyer asked for leniency, stress reputation scrutiny. The same excuses that had always excused cruelty. When the judge asked if the victim wished to speak, Clara stood. "This isn't about punishment," she said. "It's about ending what's gone on too long. I'm not here to win. I just want peace for myself and my daughter." A recorder clicked on somewhere near the back. "There was a time I thought silence kept me safe," she added. "It only made me smaller. I won't live like that anymore." The judge's decision came soon after guilty on all counts, custody revoked. Evan lifted his head, searching her face for something she no longer owed him. The space between them was no longer a fight, just distance that would never close. When the gavel fell, the sound was soft. Reporters rose, cameras flashing. Her lawyer spoke about next steps, words that dissolved in the noise. At the back of the room, Matteo sat alone, arm still bandaged under his jacket. He hadn't spoken, but when their eyes met, a quiet smile passed between them, tired real. When the room emptied, Matteo stood as she approached. "I didn't plan to come," he said. "But you deserve to see a familiar face that isn't holding a camera. You look out of place here." "I always do." He handed her an envelope. A signed transfer of a trust in Emma's name, enough to start again anywhere. "For her," he said simply. Clara folded the paper, slid it back. She didn't thank him. Words felt too small. "You should rest," she said. "The city isn't kind to people who try to change it. I'm harder to wear down than I look." A bailiff called from the doorway. Matteo nodded. "Take care of yourself. I'm learning." He smiled faintly and turned toward the exit. "Matteo," she called. He paused. "You were right," she said. "Peace isn't given. You make it." He lifted a hand in acknowledgement and left. Clara stood alone. She slipped the envelope into her bag and walked out. Morning came soft and unhurried. Matteo's voice followed low and unhurried. He appeared at the doorway, sleeves rolled up, a bundle of wooden planks balanced against his shoulder. His clothes were plain denim cotton, no trace of the polished suits that once made him seem untouchable. "You said this window still needs fixing," he said, resting the planks by the wall. Clara smiled faintly. "I said that a month ago. I'm not known for my timing," he replied. He walked past her to the workbench, setting down his tools. The silence between them was natural, now shaped by small things rather than large ones. The sound of nails clicking against the table, the scrape of sandpaper, the quiet rhythm of a shared task. Emma looked up from her coloring book. "Is today the day you teach me pizza?" Matteo glanced at her, pretending to think. "Only if your mother promises not to burn the sauce this time." "I don't burn it," Clara said, half laughing. "You scorch it artistically," he corrected. The girl giggled and ran toward him, tugging at his sleeve. "Come on, you promised." He set the hammer aside and crouched to her level. "Then we'd better start before the dough gets tired of waiting." Clara leaned against the doorway, watching them. Emma's hand fit easily in Matteo's, her chatter filling the space. There was no trace of the fear that once lived in that voice. She rinsed her brush and left it on the sink's edge, the color bleeding slowly into the water. For the first time in years, her body didn't brace for something to go wrong. The studio wasn't much an old factory with cracked beams and uneven floors, but it was hers. No secrets, no echoes of raised voices. Just a place where days followed one another without threat. Matteo came back dusted with flour. "We're out of basil." "Emma can draw some," Clara said. "She's good at making things look real. She gets that from you." Maybe Clara smiled. "But the patience is from you." He didn't argue. They'd stopped dividing what belonged to whom. Their worlds had blurred just enough to make space for this, an in-between life where neither had to apologize for the parts that didn't fit anywhere else. When the oven timer rang, Emma came running, cheeks flushed. She lifted the pizza's edge with a spatula, triumphant. "See, not burned miracles happen," Matteo said dryly, earning a nudge from Clara. They ate standing at the counter, crumbs scattering on paper towels. Conversation drifted easily from the neighbor's cat to Emma's art project, to whether the roof would last through the next storm. From the harbor, a bell rang, faintly carried by the sea breeze. Later after Emma fell asleep on the couch, Matteo stepped out to the porch. Clara followed with 2 mugs of coffee. They stood together watching late sunlight catch on the rusted fence at the yard's edge. "You ever think about the city?" he asked. "Sometimes. But I don't miss it." "Me neither," he said, "though I think it still misses us." She laughed. Let it. The quiet stretched between them, easy now filled with the creak of the porch and the slow pull of the tide. "I still have things I can't undo," Matteo said. "So do I, but we don't have to live inside them." He nodded. No more words needed. Emma stirred in her sleep, murmuring about colors and stars. Clara smiled, watching her through the open door. As evening settled, she picked up her brush and added a single stroke to the canvas, a faint outline of a hand reaching back toward the rain. When she turned, Matteo was still watching, calm and unreadable. "You're painting again," he said. Clara dipped the brush once more, drew a final line, and let it dry. No grand words followed. Only the smell of warm bread, the hush of the ocean against the shore, and a child's soft laughter drifting through sleep. It wasn't a new beginning, not exactly just life steady and unremarkable, the way peace always is when it decides to stay. Peace doesn't arrive perfect. It grows quietly through small choices, through forgiveness, slower than love. Clara and Matteo didn't find a fairy tale. They built something sturdier, a life that could hold both guilt and grace. Maybe that's what healing is, not erasing what broke you, but learning to live gently with the cracks. Carry that thought with you. Find the quiet, rebuild what's yours, and let ordinary moments become your peace.